Right, let's dive straight into the abyss, shall we? Because honestly, where else can we start when talking about Gaza these days? The latest news, fresh as of today, June 5th, 2025, a date that will undoubtedly be just another grim tally mark in a very long, very depressing line of them, involves an Israeli attack on the Al-Ali hospital. Yes, a hospital, again. It's almost like there's a playbook, and chapter 1 is, how to make a bad situation infinitely worse. This particular attack, we're told, claimed the lives of 4 journalists. 4 people whose job it was to tell us what the hell is going on, now silenced. Permanently. And it's not just the Al-Ali hospital, which some also know as the Baptist hospital, because apparently even a name change can't save you. No, the casualty reports are flowing in from all over Gaza. Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis received 31 bodies. Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City got 14. Another 7 turned up at Al-Ahli. That's 52 Palestinians killed in Israeli attacks just today. 52 individual lives, stories, families, all gone. And this, remember, is on top of the tens of thousands already killed since this latest nightmare kicked off in October 2023. It's a number so staggering it almost loses meaning, which is precisely why we need to keep saying it. The sheer scale of this tragedy is something that our brains, frankly, are not equipped to handle. We hear 54,607 Palestinians killed and 125,341 wounded, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, and it's like static. White noise. But each one of those numbers was a person with a favorite song, a stupid inside joke, or a crippling fear of spiders. You know, human things. The kind of things that get tragically inconvenient when you're trying to reduce a population to a statistic. And let's not forget the 1,139 people killed in Israel during the Hamas-led attacks that started this particular round of hell and the over 200 taken captive. There are no winners here, just varying degrees of unimaginable loss. It's a relentless cycle of violence where the brief pauses are just moments to reload, or in this case, for the US to veto a ceasefire resolution at the UN, because of course that happened too. Just when you think there might be a glimmer of, hey, maybe let's stop the killing for a bit, in comes the diplomatic equivalent of a giant star-spangled nope. But more on that later, because believe me, the international political circus deserves its own special spotlight in this 3-ring catastrophe. For now, just absorb the fact that as people were dying, the world's most powerful body was, effectively, shrugging. Now let's talk about those 4 journalists killed at the Al-Ali hospital. Because this isn't just a footnote, it's a flashing red alarm bell. When journalists are killed, it's not just a personal tragedy for them and their families, though it is profoundly that. It's an attack on our ability to know. It's an attempt to draw a curtain over the chaos, to ensure that the only narrative that emerges is the one sanctioned by those dropping the bombs or firing the guns. And in a place as contested and information-starved as Gaza, every journalist is a lifeline to the outside world, a window into a reality that some would very much prefer we didn't see. Think about the sheer guts it takes to be a journalist in Gaza right now. You're not just dodging bullets and bombs, you're also dealing with power outages, communication blackouts, the constant threat of arrest or worse, and the psychological toll of witnessing unending suffering. These aren't highly paid international correspondents helicoptering in and out from fancy hotels, though their work is also vital. Many are local reporters, deeply embedded in their communities, telling the stories of their neighbors, their friends, their own families, often at immense personal risk. Their cameras and notebooks are their weapons, and tragically, that makes them targets. The Committee to Protect Journalists and other watchdog groups have been screaming about the unprecedented number of media workers killed in this conflict for months. It's a statistic that should shock us to our core, but like many horrific statistics emerging from Gaza, it risks becoming just another number. Why is this happening? Well, sometimes it's tragically being in the wrong place at the wrong time in a war zone. But other times, and this is the deeply chilling part, there are credible accusations of deliberate targeting. Accusations that need to be investigated thoroughly and impartially, though holding your breath for that might lead to an unfortunate outcome. When you silence a journalist, you blindfold the world. You allow impunity to fester. You make it easier for atrocities to occur in the shadows. So the killing of these 4 individuals isn't just an isolated incident within a broader conflict. It's a strategic blow. It sends a message to every other reporter on the ground. Your work is dangerous, and you are not safe. It's an attempt to control the narrative by eliminating those who would dare to offer an alternative one, one that includes the uncomfortable, messy, and often horrifying truth of what it's like to live and die in Gaza today. So, we've talked about the big, terrifying numbers: 54,607 dead, 125,341 wounded. These figures are essential. They paint a stark picture of the scale. But what about the daily life, or what passes for it, for those still breathing in Gaza? Imagine trying to find food when famine is not just looming, but practically knocking down your door with a skeletal hand. Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF staff, actual medical professionals, have reportedly had to donate their own blood because the Palestinians they are trying to treat are so malnourished their bodies can't produce enough. Let that sink in. Doctors are giving their own blood because the hunger crisis is that acute. Every single day is a struggle for the basics: water, food, shelter, a moment of safety. The infrastructure is decimated. Homes are rubble. Schools are shelters if they're still standing. Hospitals, as we've seen, are targets. The simple act of queuing for aid can be a life-or-death gamble. We heard that hundreds of Palestinians were killed and wounded while seeking aid at distribution points run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in recent days. People desperate for a bag of flour or a can of beans, met with gunfire or chaos so severe it turns deadly. How utterly broken does a system have to be for that to happen? Think about the psychological toll, constantly living under threat, having witnessed unspeakable horrors, having lost loved ones, your home, your livelihood. The trauma is unimaginable, and it's being inflicted on an entire population, generation after generation. Children are growing up knowing nothing but war, displacement, and loss. What does that do to a society? What does that do to the future? These are not abstract questions. They are the lived reality for over 2 million people crammed into one of the most densely populated strips of land on Earth, a place many now call an open-air prison, and that was before this latest escalation. And amidst this, there are these surreal flashes of attempted normalcy. Palestine's national football team is still somehow in the running for their first World Cup appearance. They have crucial qualifying matches coming up. It's a tiny flicker of hope, of something than war. But even that is played out against this backdrop of utter devastation. It's a testament to human resilience, absolutely, but it's also a heartbreaking reminder of everything that's being systematically destroyed. Not just lives and buildings, but dreams, aspirations, and the simple human desire for a normal life, perhaps even a boring one. Let's zoom in on the hospitals, because what's happening to healthcare facilities in Gaza is, to put it mildly, a complete and utter catastrophe that violates pretty much every rule in the book of civilized warfare, assuming such a book still exists and isn't just a collection of ironic suggestions. We've already mentioned the recent attack on Al-Ali Hospital and the bodies arriving at Nasser and Al-Shifa. These aren't just buildings, they are supposed to be sanctuaries, places of healing, protected under international law. Instead, they've become horrifyingly frequent datelines in casualty reports, caught in the crossfire, or worse, directly hit. The Gaza Health Ministry is trying to function in an impossible situation. Imagine trying to run a health service when your hospitals are overflowing, undersupplied, understaffed, and repeatedly damaged. Doctors and nurses are working around the clock, performing miracles with dwindling resources, often becoming casualties themselves. We heard earlier about MSF staff donating their own blood. This isn't a sustainable healthcare model. It's a desperate last-ditch measure in a system that has completely collapsed under the weight of conflict and blockade. The dedication of these medical professionals is heroic, but heroism shouldn't be the primary healthcare strategy. The repeated strikes near or on hospitals have a devastating ripple effect. It's not just the immediate casualties, it's the fear that prevents people from seeking care. It's the destruction of vital medical equipment. It's the impossibility of maintaining hygiene standards, leading to the spread of infectious diseases. It's the psychological trauma inflicted on patients and staff who believe they are in a place of safety, only to find it transformed into another war zone. The phrase "do no harm" seems like a distant, almost mocking echo in the corridors of Gaza's besieged medical facilities. And the international response? Well, there's condemnation, sure. Britain's UN ambassador Barbara Woodward criticized Israel's military operations and restrictions on aid as unjustifiable and counterproductive. Strong words. Slovenia's UN ambassador Samuel Zabogar emphasized the need to stop using food as a weapon, which is also, a pretty basic tenet of not being a monster. But these words, however strongly phrased, haven't translated into tangible protection for these hospitals or the people they serve. The Red Cross or crescent emblems on these buildings seem to be treated less as a protective shield and more as a bullseye. Section 5, The Hunger Games, Gaza Edition, Aid Efforts Drowning in Red Tape and Politics. Alright, let's talk about getting food and medicine into Gaza, which sounds simple but is apparently more complex than assembling IKEA furniture in the dark while being chased by badgers. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, for instance, announced it's resuming aid distribution at 2 points after a one-day shutdown. Why the shutdown? Oh, just the small matter of hundreds of Palestinians reportedly being killed and wounded while trying to get aid at its distribution points. Yes, you heard that right. People are dying trying to get food, which tells you everything you need to know about the desperation levels and the sheer chaos of the aid process. This Gaza Humanitarian Foundation itself is swimming in controversy. The Boston Consulting Group, BCG, a name you usually associate with PowerPoints and telling companies to synergize their core competencies, actually withdrew its team amid criticism. There were resignations of top executives and, get this, allegations of the Israeli military shooting into crowds of civilians rushing for aid packages. The United Nations and other major humanitarian partners have basically said, thanks but no thanks, refusing to join the effort due to concerns over neutrality and the, and I quote, militarization of aid. When experienced aid groups are backing away, that's not a good sign. It's like seeing a rat swim away from the sinking ship. Médecins Sans Frontières, a group that goes into the world's most dangerous places as a matter of course, had about 100 of its staff protesting this GHF aid delivery scheme in Geneva. When MSF, the actual Doctors Without Borders, are protesting your aid delivery methods, you might, just might, be doing something catastrophically wrong. The core issue seems to be that aid delivery is being managed in a way that's either dangerously incompetent, deliberately obstructive, or a horrifying cocktail of both. The result is the same life-saving supplies are not reaching enough people, and when they do, it can be lethally dangerous. The humanitarian crisis is described as severe, with famine looming. That's not hyperbole, that's the assessment of people who know what famine looks like. Britain's UN ambassador criticized Israel's restrictions on humanitarian aid as unjustifiable. Slovenia's ambassador talked about the need to stop using food as a weapon, and yet the aid trickles in when it should be flooding. The obstacles are numerous damaged roads, active conflict, complex inspection processes, and a fundamental lack of will from some quarters to ensure that aid flows freely and safely. It's a manufactured crisis layered on top of a conflict-driven one, and the victims are, as always, ordinary people. Section 6, Diplomatic Gridlock, the UN Security Council's Theater of the Absurd. Now, let's turn our attention to the glittering stage of international diplomacy, specifically the United Nations Security Council, where decisive action goes to die a slow, painful death by veto. Just yesterday, or rather today depending on your time zone, the U.S., bless its cotton socks, vetoed a resolution calling for an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. An immediate, unconditional, permanent ceasefire. Words that, to most sane people, sound pretty good when tens of thousands are dead and famine is on the horizon. But no. The U.S. was the only country to veto it. The other 14 Security Council members, bless their collective hearts, all supported it, 14-1. That's not a close call. That's the diplomatic equivalent of everyone agreeing the sky is blue except for one guy loudly insisting it's plaid and smells faintly of cheese. The stated reason for the U.S. veto? The resolution's failure to condemn Hamas and call for its disarmament. Now those might be valid points for a broader peace plan, but when the house is on fire and people are burning alive, do you really stand outside arguing about the faulty wiring that might have started it, or do you, perhaps, try to put out the damn fire? Hamas, unsurprisingly, condemned the U.S. veto. You don't need to be a geopolitical strategist to have seen that one coming. It's a move that further isolates the U.S. on this issue, at least within the confines of the UN Security Council chamber, and provides ample fodder for those who accuse it of enabling the continuation of the conflict. Meanwhile, on the ground, the bombs continue to fall, the casualty lists grow longer, and the humanitarian situation gets more desperate. The veto effectively means that the world's most powerful body is unable to collectively demand an end to the bloodshed, because one permanent member says no. That's quite a system, isn't it? This isn't the first time, of course. The US has a long history of using its veto power to shield Israel from critical resolutions, but the sheer scale of the current crisis in Gaza has made each new veto feel increasingly untenable to many international observers. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, a man who seems to spend his days watching the world burn while politely asking people to consider using a fire extinguisher, continues to emphasize the importance of a two-state solution. A noble goal, certainly, but one that feels light years away when you can't even agree to stop shooting at each other for 5 minutes. Section 7. The Great Game in Gaza Arming Allies, Sowing Chaos. And if the international diplomatic scene wasn't messy enough, let's peer into the equally murky world of on-the-ground tactics and regional power plays. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently confirmed something rather eyebrow-raising. Israel had armed Palestinian groups or clans in Gaza that opposed Hamas. Yes, you read that correctly. Arming factions within Gaza. Netanyahu stated this strategy was implemented in consultation with security officials and aimed to, wait for it, save lives of Israeli soldiers. It's a bold claim, essentially arguing that fostering internal conflict is a life-saving measure. This revelation, or rather confirmation, has, as you might imagine, stirred the pot. The Palestinian Mujahideen movement, for one, denounced these reports, accusing Netanyahu's government of spreading chaos. Well, spreading chaos does seem like a plausible outcome when you start handing out weapons to various groups in an already volatile and desperate environment. The idea, presumably, is to find or create local partners who can manage security or governance in a post-Hamas scenario, or perhaps just to further fragment Palestinian society. Whatever the strategic master plan, it's a high-stakes gamble with unpredictable consequences, and one that has a long and often disastrous history in conflict zones around the world. Meanwhile, the broader international involvement continues in other, perhaps more conventional, but equally impactful ways. For example, it's been highlighted that the Netherlands continues to support the supply chain for Israel's F-35 fighter jets. Research by the Palestinian Youth Movement has pointed to shipments of F-35 parts going through the port of Rotterdam. So, while some countries are wringing their hands and calling for aid, others are facilitating the delivery of advanced military hardware that plays a significant role in the conflict. It's a stark reminder that international relations are rarely simple, and economic and strategic interests often underpin public postures. This arming of local groups also brings to mind the UN Secretary-General's criticism of Israel's expansion of illegal settlements. While seemingly a separate issue, it speaks to a broader strategy of shaping the reality on the ground in ways that many argue undermine prospects for a lasting peace, or even a viable Palestinian state. Creating facts on the ground, whether through settlements or by empowering certain factions, has long-term implications that go far beyond the immediate military objectives. It's all part of a complex, brutal chess game where the pawns are invariably ordinary civilians caught in the middle. Section 8. Nowhere Safe, Displacement, Despair, and the Vanishing Horizon. The sheer scale of displacement in Gaza is almost impossible to comprehend. Following evacuation orders issued by the Israeli military in places like Khan Yunis, Palestinians have been forced to seek refuge in areas like Al-Mawasi. This is a so-called humanitarian zone, yet it's an area that has also seen repeated Israeli attacks. So you're told to leave your home, which might already be rubble, and go to a designated safe zone, which then also gets bombed. Where exactly are people supposed to go? The moon? Are we building rockets for Gazan refugees now? Because that seems like the only place left that might not be targeted. This constant forced movement exacerbates every other aspect of the crisis. It makes aid delivery even more chaotic. It shatters community structures, it separates families, and it does all this to a population already teetering on the brink of famine, as we've discussed. People are living in makeshift tents, often without access to clean water, sanitation, or basic medical care. These are conditions ripe for the spread of disease, adding another layer of misery to an already unbearable situation. The term safe zone in Gaza seems to be an oxymoron of the cruelest kind. The psychological impact of this constant uncertainty and fear is immense. Imagine the terror of not knowing if the place you've fled to for safety will be the next target, of not knowing where your next meal will come from, or if your children will survive the night. This isn't just a physical toll, it's a deep, corrosive emotional and mental trauma being inflicted on millions. UN Secretary-General Guterres talks about maintaining the vision for a two-state solution. But for many Palestinians just trying to survive until tomorrow, such grand political visions must feel like a distant, almost fantastical abstraction when compared to the immediate, pressing need for safety and sustenance. And yet, life, in its most tenacious and heartbreaking form, tries to persist. We mentioned the Palestinian national football team earlier. It's a small thing, perhaps, but it represents a desire for normalcy, for identity, beyond that of victim or refugee. But how do you dream of scoring a goal when your entire world is a battlefield? How do you focus on a qualifying match when your family is starving? The resilience is astonishing, but it's a resilience being tested to its absolute limit, and beyond. The horizon of hope for a better future is not just vanishing, it's being actively erased by the relentless realities of this conflict. Section 9. An appeal to sanity, finding humanity amidst the rubble. So after wading through this ocean of despair, death, and diplomatic dysfunction, where do we land? Well, if there's one overarching takeaway, it's that the current trajectory is leading to more suffering, more hatred, and absolutely no resolution. The cycle of violence, fueled by political intransigence and a horrifying disregard for civilian life, needs to be broken. This isn't a call for a utopian dream, it's a desperate plea for a bare minimum of humanity, a recognition that the people caught in this meat grinder are just that, people, not statistics, not political pawns, not collateral damage. An immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire, like the one vetoed at the UN, is not just a nice idea, it's a fundamental prerequisite for anything else. You cannot deliver aid effectively while bombs are falling. You cannot begin to address the trauma while new traumas are being inflicted daily. You cannot talk about long-term political solutions when the immediate priority is simply staying alive. The international community, and particularly those nations with the most influence, needs to move beyond rhetoric and apply genuine, sustained pressure to stop the killing and allow unfettered humanitarian access. This is not about taking sides in a conflict, it's about siding with humanity. The human stories behind the numbers, the journalists killed trying to report the truth, the doctors donating their own blood, the families fleeing from one safe zone to another, the children who know only war, must be amplified. Empathy is not a finite resource, though it sometimes feels like it when confronted with overwhelming tragedy, but it's essential. We need to see the faces, hear the voices, and understand the profound human cost of this crisis. This isn't some distant, abstract conflict, it's happening to real people right now, and the consequences will echo for generations. Ultimately, any path forward requires accountability and a genuine commitment to a just and lasting peace. This includes addressing the root causes of the conflict, ending the occupation, and ensuring security.